Hello and welcome to Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank. I'm with my good buddy Marc. Again, this is the podcast where we find albums for one another and then we have to review them and give our honest opinion. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and follow us on Instagram and now even YouTube. And for this episode, we're going to change it up a little bit. I know Marc's excited about this, and if you listen to the end of the last episode, we said that we're going to dedicate this whole episode to concerts and many things we're going to be talking about, maybe our first memories, favorite types of venues, best concerts, worst concerts, some stories. I know, Marc, you have a whole bunch of stories that you're going to share. I'm excited about this, Marc. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Music's been a part of our lives since we were kids. And a big part of that for me has been live music. So I'm really excited to be doing tonight's episode just on kind of some of the fun things we like and some of the things we hate about concerts, and some good times, some bad times. We'll talk about it. I was thinking about it. I couldn't tell you how old I was, but I'm pretty sure my mom took me to see Peter, Paul, and Mary when I was a kid.
Wow.
So it was that, or like there was like a panda that had a bunch of songs and we saw him in the park. One of the two of those was like the first, but like when you're a kid, I don't count that. Like, it's really weird today. Like you've taken your girls to see some concerts, but like,
sure,
you're not taking your girls to shows. You're not taking I got to see Propaganda a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And there were like 12-year-olds, which was like bizarre to me. So, like for me, and I guess, for that kid, that was his first show maybe, or maybe he's been to something else. But like, I didn't really start going to concerts and seeing bands until I was almost in high school, except for, the stuff we did as kids. Did your folks take you to see any shows or take you to see a band or anything?
Yeah, good question. I was thinking of the first concert experiences that I was exposed to. And on a side note, Peter, Paul, and Mary was my wife's first concert too. So
nice.
I mean, it's about a boy's magical dragon, right? That's what that song's about.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of the first concert experiences I had. I always remember going to big orchestras. This is when I lived in New York prior to obviously moving to Florida. I know my dad was in a profession where there was a lot of opportunity to see live acts. My cousin Anthony went to Juilliard and is a very accomplished bass player, and his band would always be performing at my either me or my sister's kind of events, depending on what was going on in our lives, which was pretty cool. I was always fascinated by the sound. Always fascinated, believe it or not, with the drummer, which I think you would appreciate, Marc. It was just very cool. I would want to say that probably my first official concert experience was seeing Sinatra. That was down here. I was like 10 or 11. But yeah, I would say that was my official kind of first concert experience. I always, believe it or not, I had this weird thing as a kid though with the noise. So if for some reason I always have to, I'd have to cover my ears, and I had a hard time kind of being able to let loose in that. I don't know if there was some sort of sensory issues going on there. But of course, as I got older, I learned to do some things to kind of deal with it and really get into it. I think Sinatra, though, was my first experience. For some reason, the memories are hard to think about nowadays. But
I can paint that picture for the listeners at home if you want. So imagine listeners who don't know Frank, young Frank. Just imagine whatever you assume he looks like now at 10, and then put some neon orange earplugs in. And then, of course, it's Sinatra, so he's drinking a glass of Jack Daniels on the rocks.
There you go.
In a suit with Frank Sinatra. I mean, that's an awesome image. I'm really jealous that you got to drink Jack Daniels with Frank Sinatra when you were 10. That's awesome. That's really cool, though, because that's one of those, I hadn't thought, obviously I brought up Peter, Paul, and Mary, but I hadn't thought about, when we discussed doing an episode on concerts, the Rat Pack. Right. I know that's kind of more of a thing for you.
Yeah.
But man, that would be kind of cool to see, to go to one of those old theater shows, sit down for the night. The beginning of Goodfellas, where you go in, you get the table, Frankie Valli's singing, man, what a different time our parents and our parents' had when it came to going and seeing live music.
Yeah, well, it's funny is my dad was born in '39, so I mean he was before rock and roll, right? So he knew the big band stuff, he knew the Sinatra stuff, and that was the music that he preferred to listen to. He totally glossed over the '60s and '70s, as you can imagine. That was not his flavor. He liked some songs here and there, but he definitely didn't like that. But those would be the types of bands that I would have been exposed to in an effort to see, especially in that New York area. Guys like Dion DiMucci from Dion and the Belmonts, Frankie Valli, even though he was in the '60s, but my dad really liked him as well.
Do you think our listeners just figured out why we're so pro mafia? I'm not saying Frank's dad was in the mafia. Not saying that.
Not saying that at all. Not saying that at all. Yeah, exactly. It was such a different style of music, and that's what I would have been taken to as a kid. It was definitely more on my father's side as opposed to my mother taking me to see shows. But yeah, those are the first kind of experiences. But as a kid, right, you don't really know what to make of it, right?
I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, and I had a hard time thinking if I even liked them for a while because, like, I remember as a kid, there's that whole period of time when I think there were opportunities to go, but I just didn't care. Did you ever feel like that?
Early on, certainly with, I joined the band in the 6th grade, so we did, classical band, and I joined the jazz band. And we certainly went to, plays and things like that as kind of kids do. You take your kids to school plays and, you go to the field trip to see a play at the Performing Arts Center or whatever. I think what I liked about it was the theatrical nature of it and
right.
Not so much maybe what they were doing musically. I think I just knew that I liked that they were performing. Does that? I mean, I guess that kind of answers your question.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
That's especially when you're young, man. That's such an odd time to be exposing kids to music, but like to be taking kids to show. That's why I like seeing that kid at a propaganda show. I've got that Social D live video that you and I have watched half a dozen times together.
Totally.
And he brings his kids out at the end, and you're like, that's really cool, but like, do those kids have any idea what's going on? Like, they're just backstage watching their dad. Like, can you grasp it at that level? And even if they were in the audience, like, this is just crap you made your kids listen to. Does it mean anything to them?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's willing to wear the cool T-shirt, but like, I kind of thought Peter, Paul, and Mary was cool when I was growing up because that's all my mom listened to.
Yeah.
I can tell you when we moved to Florida, we had 3 tapes in the van, or it wasn't a van. It was a little teeny tiny Toyota or something like that. My mom and the 4 kids.
Right.
We had Sesame Street's like cassette on how to do the alphabet.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What Big Bird puts it together as one big word.
Yeah. We had Fleetwood Mac's Rumors.
Ah, okay.
And I think the Mac might be a band that you and I need to dedicate an episode to.
Right.
So that we can talk about why they're shit. And then the one that made the most influence on me, James Taylor's Greatest Hits. And for no other reason than the song Steamroller, where I learned the word fuck.
There you go. That's where you learned it, right?
Yeah. So, I remember that very clearly. But like as a kid, especially when you're young, we moved down here when I was 9. You saw Sinatra at 10.
Yeah.
Still really trying to figure out musically what you dig is like, man, remember when that was like the hardest thing you had going on?
Yeah, I know, right?
I would love that problem.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that to be the issue, just to figure out kind of, do you want to go to these concerts and stuff like that? And what's interesting is how the venues have evolved too, right? So we talk about like, seeing something like a Sinatra in an arena or, these big stadium shows. I mean, I remember in 1990, when my sister went to see, New Kids on the Block, it was at Joe Robbie Stadium, right? And, it's a stadium show, but then what happens is then you progress, right? And the stuff we started liking were in smaller and more intimate settings. Today at our ages, what do you think? Would you still like to go to a smaller and intimate setting? Do you like the mid-sized stuff, or do you like the big stadium?
I think it depends on what you're seeing. I think certain acts and certain musicians need a bigger stage. Like I'm not afraid to say that I like Metallica.
Yeah, same here.
Metallica is really cool on a gigantic stage with a giant backdrop, and they've really put in the time to put a 2.5 hour set together. They've put a full show on for you behind them, between footage of them and artwork and film that ties into it one way or the other. I think for that, a big stadium show is really cool. For other things, like when you and I saw The Descendants, which is a band I think both of us were kind of under the impression that we just weren't going to get to see.
Totally.
Victims of circumstance, victims of, Florida and people hating to come here.
Yeah.
We got really lucky. I happened to see them the year before when they came to Orlando because I drove 3 hours out of my way to where I live now. Because I desperately wanted to see them, and I didn't know that I'd get another chance to see them a year later with you. But I think, they played, for those of you not familiar with South Florida, Club Revolution or Revolution live down in the heart of Fort Lauderdale. Great venue for them, a big enough stage that they can move and have energy.
Yeah.
They can fill the room, and it's just electric. But at the same time, you and I saw the same show 2 nights apart. I saw it here in Orlando. You saw it down south. We both got to see, excuse me, I'm choking on my own words.
Good.
Help me out, Frank.
We got to see the Descendants really kind of embrace the venue, right? And really
give
us that intimate experience.
Well, yeah, we certainly did. And I saw them up here the year before at the House of Blues, which still worked. Still a pretty good-sized venue for them.
Right.
A little bigger, certainly, than what we saw them down in Fort Lauderdale, but it worked for them. I was going to say, and folks at home, excuse me for kind of I was tripping over names in my head. We got to see Chad Price,
yes,
who was the singer for All, which used to be the Descendants. It kind of is, or, however, if you're not familiar with the All Descendants story, go look at Filmage. It's awesome. Pay both of those bands way more respect because they're amazing. Anyway, but we got to see Chad do his solo thing. And I saw him at a very small venue called Will's Pub.
Yep.
With about 15 other people. Hey, it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday night. I don't remember. But it was a great dude with an acoustic guitar venue. Nice and small, really intimate. When he talked to the audience and the audience talked back, he was able to have a real interaction and really make it a memorable experience. And I think, certain bands have certain venues that work better for them. Years and years ago, Frank and I went to see the Foo Fighters.
We did.
Who were great. I don't give a shit. Foo Fighters can be awesome. I don't love everything, but they're certainly really cool live. It
was a great show.
And one of my favorite bands who I've seen in really small venues and, as I'm describing, in an arena, Against Me opened for them. And Against Me in an arena didn't carry the weight that Foo Fighters did.
Right.
But if you take it way back to when they released Reinventing Axl Rose, and they played it, what was that tiny Ray's Downtown Blues in West Palm Beach to 400 kids. There's no air conditioning. It's the middle of summer.
I think the Metal Factory, we saw them too with Anti-Flag and None More Black and Rise Against too. Yeah,
I mean, just great small clubs where everybody piled on top of each other, well exceeding whatever the fire marshal limit is for those shows. Those were the venues to see those kind of those bands that are especially really hungry, really, really into it, really doing it for the right reasons before the money or the popularity got to them. Every band's got its venue. So like Against Me is a great one, man. If you can find Against Me in a small club or a cool little bar, go see them. If they're playing a festival, go see them. They still put on a great show. If they're opening for somebody in an arena, know that you're going to get 25 minutes of some songs, and then they're going to go. It's not going to be the same experience.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head, right? So
I
what
hope so.
venue what venue what venue is best, it really depends on the band. Obviously we could have
Yeah.
our own individual preferences, but it depends on the band. Metallica, you need the big stadium with the pyrotechnics and, like you said, the backdrops and all that stuff, the
Yeah.
lighting. Against me, you just described kind of where you feel that they're best. Now you bring up festivals. Back in the day when the Warped Tour was still legit. Well, geez, I don't. The Warped Tour is no longer, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, supposedly it finished last year, but I'm sure we'll see it again.
I do like those experiences now, looking back and seeing stuff. Like, I get mad, to be honest with you, when I see like Coachella on and all these other big festivals, because I can't sit and really enjoy that band, because I know within the 25 minutes they're going to be off. Again, depends on the musical vibe too. Like, how can you put up someone in these big Coachella uh, air environments, really, and them just be like a really chill kind of mellow type band? How do you engage with all those people? Now, I know there's some people that are way talented and they end up doing that, but I don't know, I think you run into too many problems there. And as a music fan, I want to see more of that band's catalog. I want to see more of that band play those certain songs. And I don't know, I had a hard time going from act to act to act. What about you?
I think the days of the traveling tours are closer to the end. I'm pretty sure Ozfest is over.
I
Warped
think
Tour is
so.
over. And I think kind of right now we're in an era of the annual festival. Your Welcome to Rockville's, your Coachella, your Shaky Knees in Atlanta. There's a
Yeah,
big
yeah,
one in
yeah.
Chicago that's name is completely escaping me right now. Bonnaroo out in Tennessee.
Right.
And I think each one's geared a little bit more to a specific sound or audience. That's why, the fest every year in Gainesville brings in some of the greatest punk bands from everywhere. And they're able to have these venues work together in putting on all these amazing, great concerts over, 3 or 4 days. And it really works. And I think that's kind of, for right now, that's what's happening in terms of like festivals.
Right.
I think it's a matter of finding the right one for you. Certainly if you want to go to a singer-songwriter thing, or if you want to go to a more intimate venue, you're going to have those bands that know that, and that want to give those fans what they want in terms of the kind of experience. But, you're also going to get people who aren't going to say no to the money and do a big festival just for the
Sure.
sake of, playing in front of 100,000 people instead of playing in front of 200.
Yeah, it depends on the collection of artists too. I remember it was oh man, it was 94. I think it was 94 when they did, it was Woodstock 94, right? It wasn't Woodstock 93. I think it was Woodstock 94. I'm almost positive, right? And that was the Green Day mud incident.
Sure.
Or the mud on the mud on the stage and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that'd be cool. I'm like, to me, like that would be a cool experience to be a part of. But also, too, the music at the time was very energetic. I saw clips of a artist that my wife likes a lot, Casey Musgraves. Are you familiar with her?
No, not at all.
She's kind of started as like a roots country singer, and now has kind of crossed that line to pop too. And she was at one of these events. I don't know if it was Bonnaroo or I think it was Coachella, but I mean, her stuff again is super mellow, and the crowd. I mean, if they weren't bored, I'd be surprised. And it had nothing really to do with what was being played, but it was just the environment of it all. So I don't know. Festivals are tough, man. We've had some good Warped Tour experiences, but I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I miss Warped Tour, to be honest with you.
No. Well, I know. For me, I really like when it comes to festivals, and then we can move on after this if you want.
Yeah.
I like not necessarily genre specific, but it within the same realm of listeners. I know, back with your Woodstock 99 particularly, or 94, the
94.
later Woodstocks, and your Lollapalooza, it really was just like, hey, let's get everyone in here and bring everything together. And for me, that would, I don't want to spend, those tickets weren't cheap, man.
No.
And to pay for a bunch of bands I didn't really care to see is probably why I didn't go to many of those.
Yeah.
But, hey, something for everybody. I'm sure there's somebody who was into all those bands. There's great stuff out there. of all kinds of different genres and styles that, just isn't going to work for us.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, teach their own, man. Everyone's gonna have a different view of that, and kind of what gets them excited when they see stuff live. Yeah, totally up to the person for sure. I am a firm believer of that. Now, when we talk about a show, what do you think? Like, kind of, what are the most important aspects like you look for? So you leave a show and you're like, man, that was an awesome concert. Like, is it the performance? Is it the song selection? Is it the energy that's being given off? Like, what is it for you?
Yes. No. I mean, that's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because again, we're looking at, band by band, venue by venue experiences. I can tell you one of the best concerts I ever went to. I believe it was 2001. I went to see BB King at the Palm Beach, or not Palm Beach, excuse me, the Pompano Beach Amphitheater. It's a
Sure.
small clamshell venue. They used to hold a Warped Tour in the lawn behind it. And I got to see BB King. He was touring on his album he had just released with Eric Clapton, Riding with the King. Eric wasn't there, but he had a guy with him. He said, "You close your eyes, you're not going to know this guy isn't Eric." And they killed it, man. And BB was great. And that was a great night. It was, it was clear sky. The band was full, great horn section, great rhythm section. He had a couple guest guitarists come out. He sat down right away and asked, "You guys don't mind if I sit down, do you?" And everyone went crazy. And he played for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, and he really put it in there and really just gave this amazing soulful performance. But that's very different from going to see, what I saw H2O in old, I think it used to be when Dixie in West Palm Beach, it was then called Ovation. They got into a club.
Yes.
And I saw H2O there. I'd gone to the show because there was a girl I liked who was going to the show. I didn't know who H2O was. I knew, holy crap, the world's going to laugh at me when they hear the name of the band I couldn't think of. Newfound Glory was playing, and she wanted to go see them. And
I remember this now. I remember you going, not the show, but I remember you going to the show.
Yeah. So I went to this show, and it was just the right atmosphere. The kids were in the right mood. H2O was just on point. I think they had just released Go, or they were just about to release Go. And they cranked, and it was one of those things where I went, I need to listen to what's going on in the Northeast in terms of punk rock and hardcore.
Sure.
There's really cool stuff coming out of there. And that was probably 2002 or 3 or something like that. So I was really kind of getting into this, musically, we were all getting into this post-hardcore and getting into pop punk and emo, and all these sounds were starting to begin coming together. And it was one of those, the right night, the right band, the right crowd. H2O was an awesome concert. And I remember I had a T-shirt of a New York license plate, and it said H2O Go. Mm-hmm. And the singer Toby signed it for me because I was just I was in awe.
Toby Morris,
but I didn't know that his name was Toby. So it just looked like Two Kid. like his signature just looked like Two Kid, and I was like, okay, cool, whatever, man, that was rad. And that's another band that because I saw them live, because I experienced them live, it was just the right night, the perfect situation. I didn't get the girl, but I got the T-shirt and a bunch of records, and I'm all the better for it.
Oh man, that's pretty awesome. Well, what's funny with that particular venue too, so we talk about kind of experiences and venues and stuff like that. I felt that every time I saw a show at that particular venue, the sound was absolutely not good at all, and that maybe because it was an old Winn-Dixie, an old supermarket, right? But I remember seeing the Get Up Kids there, and I was so amped to see them, and I was like, wait a minute, I was like, the sound is all muffled and things like that. So it's crazy kind of what we take away from that. I just feel that that's an interesting yeah, interesting little take that we both had on there. Now, funny thing with H2O, and I just wanted to um, look this up. So Toby's brother Todd is, I believe, he plays guitar in Juliette Lewis and the Kicks in that band, which is a kind of funny little tidbit there.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the actress Juliette Lewis and her band. Oh, the Licks. I'm sorry. Wow. Not the Kicks. The Licks.
Oh,
He plays guitar there when they used to play. I don't think they. Yeah, he was the lead guitarist and backing vocal. So anyway, funny little tidbit there.
yeah.
But
well, I was going to say I kind of jumped the gun on some of my best concert experiences. What
yeah.
you got? Any you want to share?
Well, believe it or not, the one that comes to mind that I always say if people ask me is one that both of us went to, and that was in St. Pete. It was the Revival Tour. So, here I am, of course, talking about festivals and how I didn't like it. But this was something totally different. This wasn't a festival at all. It was just played in a nightclub. Was it a nightclub? Was it a bar? What was that?
I think it was the State Theater of St. Pete.
Yes.
I don't believe is open anymore, but it was a theater.
Yeah, and it was great because so many elements to it. So first of all, it was a showcase, and I didn't know what to expect there. Here's all these frontmen of bands that we loved, and they're gonna go up there and with an acoustic guitar and really just bare all, which was really cool. And there was a unique structure to it. They all came out right at the same time. They collectively played one another's song. Then they went in the back, and then one person came out, and then another person would come out and sing along with them. Then these people would leave, and then these people would come out, and it was little acts within the big acts, and the sound was right. The acoustic guitars were great. I met Frank Turner. I don't know if you remember that. I think you took a picture of the both of us. In fact,
I do remember that. So this is for those of you not familiar with the Revival Tour. It's not necessarily a revival in that it's a gospel thing in any mean other than it's a acoustic based show, and they kind of use it the way revivals used to operate, where one act would come on and people from another act would join them, then that first person would leave, and then they do some of their own sets. This night was particularly killer, right? Chuck Reagan's famous. I don't want to say he's famous for it, but he's notably the founder of it and was the heart of the Revival Tour, of course, from Hot Water Music fame. Frank Turner, as he mentioned. Frank would later go on to meet Frank Turner at another show.
That's right.
That we went to. We went to see Social Distortion.
Yep.
Once I can get my tongue to work right. And Frank, that you're listening to, asked Frank Turner, "Hey man, do you remember me? I met you. I was wearing a Clash t-shirt."
Yes.
And Frank Turner said to him, "That's cool, man. I meet a lot of people."
Yes.
And then I think I took another picture of you.
You did. You did.
So, but also on this tour was Chad Price from All Again.
Yep.
Was Dan Adriano from Alkaline Trio was on it. The dude from At the Drive-In,
Jim Ward.
Jim Ward was fantastic. And then my favorite pickup from that night was a band out of New Orleans called the Zydeco Punks.
Yeah, I remember you loved them.
I loved them. They were a lot of fun, very kind of fun Creo style punk rock, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Done, we really got to see some great acts that night. Really fun time going out to that particular show out in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Yeah.
What do you got for worst concert experience? Because I think I can beat it.
Oh man, I'm sure you can. I'm trying to think, because there was a period in time when I just wasn't going to concerts, and the reasons being is I just didn't want. It was like the same period of time where I just felt like I didn't want to go to the movies. And man, we're getting old, because the accordion is the instrument we're both thinking of.
People call that a squeeze box.
Hey man, it's late, and we've had days. That's all I can tell you. Mm-hmm. But worst concert experience. I mean, there's been some bad performances. Trying to think now off the top of my head. Let's think. I've seen Metallica a couple times, but those weren't bad shows by any stretch of the imagination. Those were really good. I'll tell you who I was not that impressed with, and I was psyched at the time to see them, and I'm not going to be ashamed to say that at the time I liked that at the time I liked them, but again, this is in '99, and if you listen to the previous episode, '99 to me is responsible for some of the worst for a lot of bad things involved in music, and I'll go into that again at another time. But I saw Korn in '99, and I didn't think they performed well.
Yeah, I was probably at that.
There you go.
Yeah, I remember seeing Korn in the late '90s and being just
Was that with Rob Zombie and Videodrome? Was that the same show?
I think so. Over at the wherever it is the Panthers play these days.
Right, now it's BB&T, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I was so amped for that, and I walked away, and I was like, they didn't perform good, and that was something where, I remember in the mid '90s going to see Stone Temple Pilots, and I can't tell you where Scott Weiland was with his addictions and stuff like that, but I remember whatever was going on that night, he came out vocally on. Just vocally on point. And I said to myself, wow, I never heard a band before of that nature that performed exactly like they did on record. So I kind of had this expectation going into it thinking, oh, well, all bands are going to perform like the way they do on record. And then I go there and I'm like, wait a minute, like Jonathan Davis doesn't sound like the way he does on record. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, the guitar here sounds a little off and stuff like that, and maybe that was just a show, but I wasn't particularly impressed with that too. It reminded me almost, and I never obviously saw them live, but I feel like Nirvana was not a good live performing band vocally, and even on some of Cobain's guitar parts, I felt he would mess up. I don't know if that was intentionally or not, but yeah, if the singer's not hacking it that day, it's not going to be a good show,
Yeah, well, that's definitely a thing that'll ruin a show, man.
Yeah. What about you? I know you got some interesting experiences, way more than I do.
So I want to say it was the grand year of 2007. Right,
okay.
It was my birthday. For those of you keeping score at home, that's April the 26th. I accept gifts of cash.
Yes.
Alcohol.
Yeah, that too.
Records, whatever. Anyways, so my girlfriend at the time was a big Bon Jovi fan.
Yes.
Red Flag, number one. I, being a punk rocker, wanted to go see Anti-Flag, who was in town. They were playing, Frank mentioned earlier, the Metal Factory. They were playing the Metal Factory.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to go see them, but the woman I was in a relationship with had purchased tickets to see her favorite act of Bon Jovi. It was my birthday, so she didn't make me pay for it. So I guess that's like the only plus side.
Yeah.
But we get there, and I'm vocally not happy about being there. And somebody, and it was not me, called the police and told them that there was a bomb in the building. And
Yikes.
The concert was delayed for a good 2 hours. And then the concert finally happened, and it was boring and just a complete waste of my time. Everybody seemed to be having a good time but me. I'll leave it at that. And then the worst part is that, afterwards we went to like Steak and Shake, had some food in our stomachs, and then went home and went to bed. I didn't even get laid on my birthday. I had to see Bon Jovi and didn't even get laid.
I mean, see, if this is someone's favorite act, though, you think that's a guarantee that you're going to get laid.
Right. And on my birthday.
And on your birthday.
I should have gotten laid twice.
Oh, man.
That's what I'm saying.
Or she was not born to be your baby. That's all I got to say, my friend.
You said it, buddy. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Anybody, live or dead, you would really like to see? Somebody you've always wanted to see, doesn't matter, alive or dead.
Yeah, I was bummed that I didn't catch Tom Petty before he died.
Mm-hmm.
That he was playing, around our area. I think it was, I don't know how long ago it was before he died, but I was really bummed on that because I came into the Tom Petty world late. I really started to dig deep into his albums, and I was just like, man, these are some fantastic songs. And I'm not saying he would have blown me away at his age. I mean, his Super Bowl performance when they still had people who played guitars, wasn't necessarily the best, but those songs are just so good, man. I would say Tom Petty would be mine. What about yours?
I'm kind of split on this one. I definitely would have liked to seen Hendrix in some of his iconic performances.
Yeah,
I feel like those videos just don't do justice to the night, the atmosphere, the
that's so
sound.
true.
So I would have liked to see that. And again, as a big metalhead, I would have really liked to have seen Pantera.
Oh yeah.
Heyday Pantera, just really, those live albums, you can just really hear the crowd going crazy. They had a great presence, and it's really clear it's one of the great losses of heavy metal. So I don't know. What do you got next?
Yeah, I was thinking of other bands too that are kind of like legendary, but didn't necessarily perform great. And then maybe eventually, like, you see them one time and you're like, or even on TV, and then you see them another time and you're like, oh, okay, well, they're performing better. Nirvana, of course, comes to mind because I had this VHS tape. I still do. It's probably my mom's, where it's just a whole series of their different performances in different areas and places. And again, some of the performances are very lackluster. Now, that's not to say that Dave Grohl's not doing what he's supposed to be doing on drums and stuff like that. A lot of it is vocally. But another band which is crazy, especially if you listen to their touring days, and this maybe could have been because of the mania and because of everything around it. But if you listen to those recordings of like the Beatles playing live, they're not that good.
Yeah, well, and I think the Beatles were kind of famous for saying, like, we can't even hear ourselves play.
Yeah.
We don't know if we're any good or not because of the screaming. So that's they're one of those ones that I think Frank and I will both own being pretty big Beatle fans.
Totally.
Real appreciation for them. That was a big staple of my mom's catalog growing up.
Yeah.
We listened to a lot of Beatles. I don't know that I'd want to see him. I've seen some Paul McCartney footage now, or not now, but of recent past, where he does a lot of those songs and he does a lot of his stuff.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And his live album's great. I remember you burning that one for me back in the day, and that was awesome.
That was a copy of my mom's.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but no, so I think the Beatles are definitely one of those ones that, for as great as those records were, certainly more the later than the earlier, unless you just really like that early pop stuff. I think the albums just did the work that they couldn't do live.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing. The Beatles really are an anomaly, and I'm sure throughout the show we'll get further and further into the Beatles and talk about different things that worked and didn't work, and that all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, without a doubt. Now, most recently, back in August, when I saw the Rolling Stones, and I don't know if I sent you videos or we talked about it, obviously offline, but I mean, they still rocked. I mean, they really did. You're not going to listen to the same performances that they had back in their day, but talk about energy. Richard's, like I told you when we were texting, he doesn't really play guitar constantly. That's more Ronnie Wood kind of carrying that rhythm section and stuff like that down. But I mean, that was a show I'm glad I went to. I mean, yes, it was hit after hit after hit. Nothing really so deep into the catalog where people didn't know it. But I'm glad I went to that show.
Yeah, I definitely. For me, when it comes to like acts that are still out there doing their thing.
Yeah.
We talked about venue choices earlier. Elvis Costello did like a small theater run recently that I unfortunately couldn't make it to.
Yes, I know.
But I would love to see him in an intimate setting, a small backing band. I've heard just fantastic things about his ability to put on a great show. Whether he's doing rock and roll, whether he's doing some of his bluegrass Americana stuff, whatever he's doing, man. Elvis has always had a great way of giving back to his fans, especially live. There's some great footage of him you can find online.
Oh, totally.
That if you haven't seen it, definitely check out. Elvis is one of my favorites. Now we've talked about who we would like to see.
Yeah.
Who would you never want to give $1 to live?
Well, I was asked recently by a buddy if I wanted to see Motley Crue, Def Leppard, and Poison
Oof.
recently, and okay. Let me put some stuff out there. First of all,
Frank loves Pyromania.
I absolutely do, and High and Dry as well. I mean, those two albums alone could have gotten me. If I think about it more, I think that was the influence for me wanting to pick up the guitar. I always imagined myself in that, that type of band. Those songs to me were absolutely great. And listen, Hysteria's on. I'm not gonna turn it off either. However, I don't think they can perform like they used to. I don't think Joe Elliott's voice is like that anymore. But that's not even my biggest issue, and Poison's not even my biggest issue. It's I wouldn't spend money to see Motley Crue perform because I've YouTube videos, and first of all, Neil is hardly singing. It's all the crowd, and what's the enjoyment in that? I can't justify spending money for that. What's your thoughts?
Well, certainly, I have no interest in that. I can't sit here and tell you that I've never liked hair metal. Like, look, we all went through that phase.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Everybody does it. I just today in 2020, I have no attachment to any of it.
No.
There's none of it that makes me just go like, oh, dude, that one record. Like you've got a connection where like, hey, man, that's what made you want to pick up a guitar.
Yeah.
I wasn't there, like those bands just didn't do that for me.
Right.
So like for those particularly, now other than Bon Jovi and Cloud Nothings, for me it's U2.
There you go.
I could not want to see Bono less. In fact, I would probably pay not to see Bono. Like if I could get a subscription service, like $12 a month, you never have to see Bono again.
You would do it.
And just my TV would blank every time he's on a documentary.
What's funny is the other day I was in the supermarket, and what song of theirs came on, like Mysterious Ways, or she moves in mysterious ways. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, Mark A would be aggravated, and B, I was like, this has to be atrocious to see live. And then I had to go back to a different supermarket for something else because that's practically half my life is running to the grocery store, and their other song Desire was on, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, again, Mark would be mad, and two, like I wouldn't want to see this live at all.
No, and again, there's somebody that this is for.
Yeah.
It's not for us.
It's for a lot of people, and that's great. Not for us.
Yeah, I just Joshua Tree was okay. And that's how I felt about it. And then, everybody kept saying that they were the greatest band ever. And I was just like, have you not heard of The Clash? What is wrong?
Right. Exactly.
So, and I just, that guy's so full of himself. It's just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's do some of our favorite live albums and wrap this guy up.
Yeah, you got it, man. What, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 1978 at the Hollywood Bowl, the world-renowned Steve Martin was doing a tour. He recorded one of those nights. His opening act for that tour was one of my favorite rhythm and blues bands. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, yeah.
The Blues Brothers Briefcase Full of Blues was recorded that night. It was the #1 blues album that year. Ironically, Steve Martin's album, which was recorded the same night, was the #1 comedy album of the year in 1978. So really cool. They really catch the magic of that night on those two recordings. The crowd is just absolutely having a blast. And that recording in particular, the Blues Brothers really kill it. John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd give fantastic performances. The band is in full swing. Definitely. If you're not a Blues Brothers fan, shut up. Nobody likes you. Go check out that record. Orange Whip. 3 Orange Whips.
Love it. Yep.
What do you got? What say you?
Well, I mentioned last episode, of course, the Live and the Dive series, but those things are definitely newer. There was an old Sinatra at the Sands. I remember my dad having that was a really good live album. But I'm going to go with the Cheap Trick album, the live at Budokan, that is one of the greatest. I don't want to. I don't want to jump on the bandwagon when like Rolling Stone comes out with saying greatest albums of all time, but it was on their list, and it was released in '78 as well. It's a fantastic recording. This is obviously in their tour in Japan, and I don't know, something about everything just hit the mark. The recording was great. The vocals were great. The guitars were great. The energy, it took their songs and it just really amplified them. That's one of those albums where I'm like, okay, I like the live version better than the studio version. So yeah, I'm going with that album.
Very cool, man. It's really interesting throughout rock and roll. There have been some really great live albums that have set the tone for an artist or a band. You look at Frampton Comes Alive, arguably one of the best live albums. His studio album sucked. Kiss, I think, had 2 or 3 albums out before releasing their first live record, which is really what got the band off the ground. People loved the sound of them live. You could hear much more of that theater that they presented, and it really took off for them in a big way. So for me, and Frank, if you feel differently, please feel free to chime in. Don't be afraid to pick up a live record, and certainly go to some shows, man. Go see some bands, support them. Especially today, most of them are out there touring because it's the only real way to make money in rock and roll.
Yeah, I agree, and I concur. We'll go to the shows, listen to this stuff, pay attention. Like I sit there and I'm just not only in awe, but I go ahead and I just really pay attention to the song selection, what's going on vocally, what's going on with the guitars. And I always walk away from a show being like, man, I was like, this is the first time I'm hearing that song live. And it really gives me a whole new perspective on it. And I love that when I listen to a live album and I'd be like, oh, this track I didn't really care about before, but now I really dig it like this. So it's a great experience. And yeah, Mark, I'm with you on that.
Cool, man. What are we doing next week?
Well, next episode is going to be really, really cool. So we're going to be reviewing the same album, and the album is Anthem of the Peaceful Army by Greta Van Fleet. Now, I think it's safe to say that we don't know anything about this band. Is that correct?
That is 100% true, Your Honor.
All right, cool. So we're gonna really, I think, have some interesting conversations when it comes to this. And I know they've been heralded and criticized equally as a new Led Zeppelin. In fact, the biggest criticism is that they have this inability to escape the box that they've been placed in. They have a hard time standing out of being anything more than that. Let's see if copying has gone too far in this case. I've met people who absolutely love them and like that they are carrying on that Zeppelin type sound, and other people are like, oh yeah, that's that band that sounds like Led Zeppelin. So Anthem of the Peaceful Army, released in 2018, Greta Van Fleet. I'm kind of amped for this. What about you, Mark?
I got to tell you something I heard about this band. Nothing. I've heard absolutely nothing about this band. So this will be really cool. I'm excited to walk into this. You really kind of literally, as you heard Frank say, it is the first I've heard anything of this band. Let's get into it. Let's see what it does. And thanks for checking out the podcast.
Yeah, thank you again, everyone. Again, you can follow us on Instagram. Check us out on YouTube. I will put the episodes up on there. If you have a suggestion for us, drop us a line. Let us know. And until then, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.